Welcome, everyone. This is exciting. This is we're inaugurating our new. As you can see, it's thank God we have a much clearer channel now, and we are inaugurating the Key to Redemption series, which, although we've done a few classes already, thank God on this new system, and it's clearer and better, and it's exciting. But the Key to Redemption series, we've slowed down a little bit recently, and that's no good because the key to redemption, we need to only increase. So we've been doing already the last couple of months, we've gone through the message the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave to the world a couple of months before the last months that he was speaking, before he had a stroke. About 11 months where the Rebbe was giving us phenomenal insight. And it was literally prophecy, divine inspiration, and where he is clearly laying out for us the reality of the world, the reality of where we're at on levels that no human mind can ever probe and can ever understand. It's purely a divine inspiration. And, it's taking us already 30 years or 32 years since these words were said to begin to comprehend what was being said to us. And what we're doing in these classes and at that time, the Rebbe's message basically was everything that was needed to be done spiritually above through the godly forces were all done already. Now we need to just complete the last couple of little things to bring down Mashiach into this reality, into this world. Now, we're holding by episode 30, and this whole series we refer to as Key to Redemption in our hands, because this is the message. And what are the things this instructs us on how we can live the best lives for each and every one of us to contribute to help realize this incredible ultimate purpose of all of creation, all of reality, which it's so amazing that we are the generation that can make it all happen. So this episode 34, I counted today, we had 80 classes already. It's pretty neat. 80 classes, so about 80 hours. Some of them are a little longer than that. So I would say about 85 hours or 90 hours where you can study and learn. We learned most of the talks. We skipped a few of the 34 episodes. I numbered them, but I didn't give them. But Be'ezus Hashem, we're going to fill them in. So there's probably about 29 episodes that we've gone through so far. And this episode that we're beginning to learn today is just absolutely phenomenal. It's completely transformational. When we get this information, it can blow our minds. As I will say in a minute, what the theme is, what the point of here it is. Now, the talk that we're going to study is the Dvar Malchus, which literally means the words of royalty, the words of the king, is what the Rebbe had spoken. But the week the Rebbe said it is Parshas Vayeitzei, which comes out on the Hebrew calendar about a month ago. So in our classes over here, we fell behind a month, a little less than a month. And we have to do catch up. We have to catch up Vayeitzei, Vayishlach, Vayeshev, Miketz. It's actually, we're five episodes behind. This week is already Vayigash. This is really, really intimidating. And each of these episodes deserve at least 3 to 5 classes. So we're going to have to catch up, but I couldn't bring myself to skip this one, Parshas Vayeitzei, and the next Parsha, Parshas Vayishlach, and Parshas Vayeshev. These 3, because they are inherently a continuation to the weeks before that we've been learning, to the phenomenal ideas that were being, the revolutionary ideas that we have discussed in the earlier classes. So let me briefly bring us up to speed so that when we're picking up over here on chapter and episode 34, first of all, what's the name of this episode? This episode is called "The World is Holy and Ready for Mashiach," which is a stunning statement. We are so convinced that there is so much darkness and evil, and humans are so corrupt, and that's what's being fed to us from the news. And that's what we're being seemingly seeing with sometimes when we're looking through our physical, natural, more, human eyes. or we're not always seeing things for what they really are. Comes the Rebbe in this talk, and he basically says the material physical world is completely rectified. Since the days of Adam and Eve, since Adam and Chava, we have been busy fixing and correcting and elevating and refining. It's called the work of refinement, avodas habirurim, the work of refinement. This is what we've been doing for thousands of years through all the toils and hardships and all the service, and primarily the work of the Jewish people, of all the mitzvot that we've been doing. It's all about separating the good and the bad, refining the world, so that the material physical world can eventually become a home for God, like it's going to be in Messianic times. This is the first time the Rebbe stated in absolute, unequivocal terms, 32 years ago, that the work of refining the world is done. The world is a vessel for God. The Rebbe is, however, telling us, now, what do we do now? Now you can start living the godliest life imaginable. Your physical body is a partner to your soul. It's not stuck in any darkness. It's possible that we can keep it stuck if we still keep an old mindset, if we still have a bad image or a bad self evaluation. When we think that our evil inclination is what really is entrenched in our bodies, and we are really doomed and we're unfixable, that's pathetic. That's ridiculous. The Rebbe says that means that you're not believing in all the Torah and the mitzvot. All the Torah and the mitzvot that we've done have already refined the human condition. Not only the human, the material and the all aspects of creation are ready. The only thing we need to do now is to actually turn on the lights and start running the program. There's nothing that needs to be done anymore in the hardware. Nothing has to be done anymore in the actual repairs and the fixing. The world has already been repaired enough for the godliness to be revealed. So what do we have to start doing if we want to help this revelation happen? Start living in that condition, in that Mashiach consciousness, and you'll see your body will come along with you. It will not put up the resistance that it once did. And if you're finding that it's still resisting, study a little more and realize that it's still in our imagination. There is a lot to talk about this and a lot to explain. Obviously, it's a shocking statement because this does not seem to be the reality of our own bodies, does not seem to be the reality of the world outside of us. But the Rebbe says this is the reality. And what we find about our Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is whatever he said is always the absolute truth, because he's speaking through a God. He's God's voice in this world. And therefore, he's telling it to us from a very core, essential, deep, true place. Sometimes it takes us 20, 30, 40, 50 years to catch up to the truths. And then we go, so this is what he was talking about. And this is what he's talking about. It's like when we go visit a doctor and we have our opinions about the health of our body, and it's just an opinion. But the doctor runs a lab test. And the blood comes back from the lab. And over there, the doctor can see things that we have no clue. Why? Because he's looking at a much deeper level. As the lab work comes back, they can see things in terms of the cells and so on and so forth that the physical eye doesn't see. The Rebbe can see what we can't see. He's looking at the fundamental level of energy in creation, and he sees that all the klippa, all the unholiness has already been subdued essentially. And the goodness has already been released and opened, and it's already accessible. So therefore, our physical and our spiritual lives the main point of this whole talk is that our physical and our spiritual lives can fully merge into one unit and fully bond with God so that we can live in perfect harmony and oneness with our true godly soul and with God himself. Now let's connect this to the earlier classes so that we recognize the awesome sequence of what's going on over here. In Parshas Vayeitzei, about a month before this talk, over there the Rebbe says, let's go back to Parshas Noach, about 6-7 weeks before this talk. The Rebbe there mentioned phenomenal idea, and he says all the mitzvot that we needed to do to bring Mashiach was done already. That's it, a statement. that the Jewish people have a certain accumulation of mitzvot, of good deeds that we need to do, and Torah that we need to do to bring Mashiach. Now, all of that, all those mitzvot that we needed to do was done. Now, again, he's the only one, only a leader of a generation who has access to inside information can bring us that information. I couldn't tell you that. And a regular rabbi who knows a little Talmud and can give good YouTube videos cannot tell you that. Okay, let me tell you that. No matter how great they are on stage, only a spiritual giant whose head and just his entire being is plugged into the highest, most sublime, godly levels, and only someone who communicates with the other side can give you that inside information. And that information came to us in Parshas Noach. The Rebbe says we're done. And he says, even though people still have various different things they need to fix, that's your own rectification that you should do and take care of, but it's not anymore part of the general fix that humanity needed to do in order to good deeds that we needed to do for Mashiach to come, because we're done already. If so, the Rebbe said, so who is it dependent on? If we as the Jewish people don't have to do any more good to bring Mashiach, so what's holding back the redemption? It should be here. So the Rebbe makes a stunning statement over there, and he says, well, now it's only dependent on Mashiach himself. Mashiach himself. That means it's something up to Mashiach. In other words, once we're finished, now Mashiach has to reveal himself. That's it. Now it's up to him. Mashiach, obviously, he's not just running the show on his own. He has to connect to God. God has to give him the green light. But it's up to Mashiach. And in a sense, the way the Rebbe said it, almost it's not even up to God. It's up to Mashiach wanting to come. That's kind of part of where the Rebbe left it in Parshas Noach. However, he gives us instructions. He says it doesn't mean you're off the hook. The Rebbe never lets us off the hook. He says, well, if it's up to Mashiach, you probably have to get Mashiach interested in coming. So how do you do that? So the Rebbe goes into an explanation. We can listen to the classes. It was called a higher accounting in our series. Go back on our YouTube. There's a playlist. By the way, anybody that wants to follow all these 80 classes, I have a playlist on this channel called Key to Redemption. So amongst those classes from a couple of months ago, you'll find one that's called the higher accounting. And over there, we discuss this. And over there, he says briefly in the end that the work that we need to do is we need to do the avod of Kiddush Levana. That's the sanctification of the moon, in which is related to seeking out Moshiach and beseeching Mashiach to come, meaning asking the King Mashiach to be our king. Now, that's what he said in Parshas Noach. So what happened at that time? I'm going to give you a brief narrative. What happened in 1992? The Lubavitcher Hasidim at that time. I was then a new member in the club. I had just started my integration into Chabad, but I remember those days. A frantic movement was going on in Lubavitch to get thousands of people signatures to send into the Rebbe saying, we accept you as our king. We recognize that you have all the qualifications of Mashiach, and therefore we ask of you to accept our humble submission. And we are hopeful that you will respond. And because the concept of a king always is that a king has to be elected by the people. If a king is not elected by the people, it's not true kingship. It's dictatorship. Kingship doesn't work that way. Kingship is the people have to want the king. So basically, that's what the Rebbe was hinting to clearly when he said that the service is Kiddush Levana. We're not going to explain it now because I explained it in the earlier classes. So then in the next class, in the next 2 weeks later, not that week, but the 2 weeks later in Parshas Vayeitzei, the Rebbe says, we are now holding at a time where Mashiach is no more a potential Mashiach, but Mashiach is revealed in the world already. It was related to Parshas Vayeitzei. Vayeitzei means revelation. He says the ultimate revelation is the godly revelation in the days of Mashiach, and the godly revelation that's going to come through Mashiach himself. And he goes into a phenomenal talk to explain that we all have a spark of Mashiach inside of us, and that's the deepest revelation of our soul. Just like Abraham, it's Parshas Vayeitzei, it's talking about Abraham after his circumcision. Just like Abraham, as a result of his circumcision, was able to reveal within himself his deepest self, which is the the highest dimension of his soul. And that's called that God revealed himself to him. His inner essence of his own soul of Abraham was revealed in his body. So the Rebbe says that when our deepest soul aspect, our godliness of our own soul is revealed in us, that's our spark of Mashiach. But the Rebbe says, in addition to each individual spark of Mashiach, there is a cosmic Mashiach. There is a person who all the sparks are connected to that one soul. And when we say we're waiting for Mashiach to come, we're waiting for the revelation of that soul to reveal itself. So the Rebbe says, I have news for you. The news is that cosmic Mashiach, that until now was a potential, is now revealed. He's no more just in existence in this world. He's actually revealed in this world. That was dropped there. In that talk, the Rebbe dropped a bomb. He basically said, Moshiach is here already. What the Jewish people have been waiting for Bias HaMoshiach, the coming of Mashiach. Ani Mamin, I believe, Bias HaMoshiach and the coming of Mashiach. The Rebbe says, hello, it happened already. Mashiach is here already. He's revealed. And then he leaves it by that. The following week, Parshas Chayesara, is a great, grand gathering of all the Chabad Shluchim. Thousands of Shluchim from across the entire Chabad, the world, come to once a year. There is a conference for all the emissaries in Lubavitch, and it always comes out that time of the year. So the Rebbe is talking to all of his generals, to all of his army, and he upgrades the mission statement. He says, since I have news for you, since last week I said that we're holding now in a new era, Mashiach is here already, and he's already revealed in the world. Therefore, we have to now talk about what your work is. You're my emissaries. You need to go out in the world. Instead of continuing your work of fixing the world, refining and cleansing and doing whatever else you're supposed to be doing, that work is done already. Now you just need to go ahead and bring your communities to be ready to greet Mashiach. If you want to learn about that, look at the episode. I think we had 6 classes on it, or 5 or 6 classes, called Are You Ready to Greet Mashiach? So it's worth listening to. Go listen to those classes. You'll hear what the Rebbe said. Basically, once Mashiach is here, he's got to have a reception. Are we ready to come and greet him? Obviously, that greeting Mashiach is not just saying hello. There's a lot of deep work that involves in going out to greet Mashiach. That was in Parshas Chayesara, the following week. The last episode that we studied, the following week, Parshas told us, the Rebbe explains, and we call that episode Wake Up, Mashiach is Here. The Rebbe explains how the main point of the coming of Mashiach, although most of us listening to this are going to say, Rabbi, what are you, off the wall? Mashiach is here already. What's going on with the Intifada? What's going on with Israel? What's going on with Hamas? Where's the third temple? Where is the whole thing? The exile seems as dark as it ever was. What's going on? So here's the deal. And the Rebbe himself addresses it. He says there's 2 things about the coming of Mashiach. There is the essence of Mashiach being revealed in the world. And then there is the light of Mashiach, which means Mashiach's effect on the world through his actions and through his activities. That comes after the essence of Mashiach being revealed in the world. He calls it, there's Ruchai Shel Mashiach, there is the spirit of Mashiach, and then there is Oirai Shel Mashiach, the light of Mashiach. So he says that the spirit of Mashiach, the essence of Mashiach being present in the world, is the main and the primary element of the coming of Mashiach. Because he goes on to explain that Mashiach is essence. And as long as the essence of the Jewish soul and the essence of God are inaccessible, and we can't reach it, we can't operate from that place, then Mashiach is not here. But once Mashiach himself, his soul, fully reveals itself in his body, thereby opening up in each and every one of us our essence of our soul. Where over here the Rebbe explains, and this is an amazing discourse, that it's even higher than the 5 names of the soul. The soul has 5 names, layers and layers and deeper layers of higher spiritual energies. But even the highest level, he says, is still a level. It's still a name of the soul. It's not the essence. The essence of the soul is literally one with the essence of God. So when the essence of God is now revealed in Mashiach, and that means it's revealed in this world, then it enables each and every one of us to dig out our own essence and to live from that place. If you want to explain and explore that a little more, listen to the last 6 classes of that episode that was called Wake Up, Moshiach is Here. Now the Rebbe, in continuation to that, in this episode, episode 34, in this episode, he's going to reveal to us that there is another side to this. And that is, in addition to the deepest, purest, highest level of our own self, our deepest identity being now tappable, you're able to live it, you're able to function from that deepest self of not even being yourself, being your truest self, which is being God in a body, who we really truly are, to living purely in the divine level, in divine consciousness. There's another part, because part of being the coming of Mashiach is that the physical world is welcoming it. The physical existence is not an interference. The physical world is not blurry. The physical world is not interfering with this godliness. Quite on the contrary, the most important element of Mashiach coming is that this godly, the truth of God, permeates completely the physical world in a way, not only that it is overwhelming the physical, but that the physical is a fully welcoming vessel and is fully integrating this incredible divine truth. And God is fully comfortable with the material world and with our physical bodies. And we, our souls, are fully comfortable in our body. Now we know that work of purifying the physical is the main objective of all of the mitzvot of the Torah, from when God gave it to us until today. Its work and its job was the rectification, purification of the physical world, readying it to become a perfect vessel for the soul to express itself. What is astounding in this talk that we are now introducing, and you'll hear it from the Rebbe's words, not me, I'm just going to be hopefully just a funnel, where he's going to say that we have now reached the time, because Mashiach is here, that the physical is already completely rectified. Now, I will say, comes a big, big, big evil inclination for the last 32 years, a darkness of the unholy, and basically created self-doubt to all of us to question this. Is it really true? How come I'm not feeling it? And therefore, sadly, so many people kind of like thought that maybe the Rebbe was just kind of dreaming of something, but it's not real. And I'm saying to you that the Rebbe doesn't dream, and the Rebbe doesn't make, if anything, we're dreaming and we're fantasizing. He's always right on the mark. He's not even one bit off the mark, because he speaks the word of Hashem. And therefore, if Hashem is telling you that the world is ready, that means the world is ready. Maybe it's about time we start reading it, understanding it, learning it, and believing it. And then have enough guts to start practicing it. And then suddenly we might realize, hey, I thought there was much more resistance. There is no resistance. It's all in my head. That's, if we're successful in getting there in this class, that'll be awesome. So bear with me. We're not going to get to the part that I mentioned about the world being completely fixed and finished and completed, rectified, until about the 4th class. It'll take us about a few more days, but at least we'll get started today. So here we go. The talk is going to evolve around two main themes, which are both going to converge into what? One theme, of course, is going to be the Parsha. That's going to be the second theme, the Parsha of the week, which that time was not where we're holding today, which at that time when the Rebbe said it was Parshas Vayeitzei. And what's the theme and what's the story of Parshas Vayeitzei? Jacob, the third of the patriarchs, leaves his father's house in Israel, travels down to a very unholy place, a very ungodly place, and in order to run away from his brother Esav, and also in order to find a wife, he ends up finding 4 wives, 2 sisters, marrying 2, and then the 2 become 4. And then from there, he has all of his 11 out of the 12 tribes are born there, and including a daughter, and he amasses a fortune. First, however, he goes through miserable, hellish experience. The person who he's working for, his uncle, who is also his father-in-law, is a really, really nasty guy, a a a a a a a a, a con artist, an evil person, a deceiver, a liar, and Yaakov has to work in the darkness. But in the end, he comes out on top. He comes out successful, and he returns to his father's house. That's Parshas Vayeitzei. On the way going, but one of the very important parts of the story, that when he's leaving to go out and he's going into a hostile world, he's leaving the cozy, godly, spiritual oasis of his father's home, and he's going into a dark world to confront the evils of the world, the monsters of the world. He's terrified. And he goes to sleep at night. He has a dream, the famous dream of the ladder. The angels are going up and down, and suddenly God appears and God says, I will protect you. So this talk is mainly going to focus on the Yaakov sleeping and having that dream and what the significance of that dream is. It's phenomenal. That's going to be the second theme in the talk. The first theme in the talk, he's going to be speaking about a specific Hasidic holiday, which came out, or a specific auspicious day in the Hasidic calendar. The Rebbe is the seventh Rebbe of a series of Chabad rabbis, Chabad Rebbes. His great-great-great-grandfather, the Mittel Rebbe. The Mittel Rebbe is the second Chabad Rebbe, Reb Dvar. On the 9th of Kislev is the day, it's his birthday. The Mittel Rebbe, the son of Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, his birthday was the 9th day of Kislev. Now, this talk that the Rebbe gave was on the 9th day of Kislev. So the Rebbe is talking about the auspicious day of his great-great-grandfathers. The Rebbe is a successor of his, through a few links in the middle. And the Rebbe is speaking about his ancestor's birthday. It's a reason to celebrate. But it's more than his birthday. It was also the anniversary of his passing, called the Yahrzeit. So it's both birthday and Yahrzeit on the same day. That's one day. That's the 9th of Kislev. The next day is the anniversary of the day that he was released from jail. So the Mittel Rebbe, Reb Dvar, second Chabad Rebbe, the master of Kabbalah and mysticism, like very few can compare, I don't know if anybody, to the Mittel Rebbe's endless knowledge. It was like unbelievable. So he has 3 events in 2 days. Birthday and day of passing the same day. The next day is the day that he was released from jail, a year before he passed away. He was arrested. I'm not going to get into the story. He was released. And it's a festive day. So the Rebbe is going to discuss his great-grandfather, the significance of the day, but primarily is going to focus on the theme, on something very interesting, and that is that this second Chabad Rebbe had something very unique in his life, that his days of his life were perfect. What do we mean perfect? He passed away on his birthday. So when a person passes away on their birthday, then all their years are perfect years, because you don't have any there's nothing like, so in other words, you say, how old was he when he was, actually with the Mittel Rebbe, I think he was 54 years old, I think he was when he passed. He passed away pretty young, right? 54, I think, in the 50s. I'm not sure, but I think it was 54. And the fact that that it was exactly on his 54th birthday, passed away. So that is a perfection. Now, how do we know that's something special? We're going to see that the Midrash tells us that the greatest rabbis and the greatest tzaddikim, God completes their lives to be perfect, that they pass away the day they were born. The classical great one is Moses. Moshe was born on the same day, passed away on the 7th day of Adar. It's his birthday and the day of his passing. He lived a long life, 120 years, and then he passed away on the very same day. So the Rebbe is going to explain the concept of this perfection. What does it mean? Why is it significant to pass away on the day of a birthday? And these two themes are going to converge together. The story of Yaakov, the sleep, his encounter during his sleep, and the main theme that the Rebbe is going to talk about, he's going to speak about why the highest revelation that Jacob had and the highest promise that Jacob had was while he was asleep. And he was sleeping and he was laying horizontal on the floor. Okay, so I'm just giving you an idea of where we're going over here. The Rebbe is going to explain that there is something magical about the fact that the highest moment in Jacob's life, when he's experiencing an encounter with God Almighty himself, and he was actually sleeping on the holiest place. We're going to talk about all this later. The revelation and the godly encounter happened when he was sleeping. And the main point the Rebbe says when a person is sleeping is that your toes and your brain are on the same level, which doesn't seem to be too great. Usually we want our heads to be higher. Our head is the superior part of the human, the intellect, which makes us greater than the animal, and so on, which leads us to all the accomplishments in life, is our head. The Rebbe is going to explain, as great as it is to have a superior head, there's a certain level when you reach the ultimate level, then your toes and your head can be even. That's the messianic level. And that is related to the second theme, or the first theme of the talk, a person whose life is perfect, lives perfect years, their birthday and their passing is on the same day. So let's understand this is just a bunch of information. And with all of this, all these ideas are going to lead us up to an understanding of what state is the world when it is ready for Mashiach. Okay, so let's not hesitate anymore, and let's go right into it. This was all introduction. So the talk begins in chapter number 1. He says, regarding the Mittler Rebbe is the second Chabad Rebbe, as I mentioned earlier, who is the birthday boy of this day. It's his birthday. He's also the yahrzeit. He's also the person whose yahrzeit we're celebrating on the 9th of Kislev. We find there's a novelty. We find something special about him. What is that? That he celebrates his birthday and the day of his passing on the very same day. That's number 1. Another unique fact regarding the Mittler Rebbe's life, that immediately the next day, on the 10th day of Kislev, is the anniversary of a holiday pertaining to his release from prison, which is called Chag HaGeula, the Yom Tov of his redemption. So what does this mean? The Rebbe is going to take all these details and explain to us a deeper concept, that this is expressing something. This is an empowerment for the Jewish people. See, the leader of the Jewish people, who are really the leaders of the world, they're not living private lives. Their lives are godly infusion for the world. And therefore, what the significance of this means to us, as we're going to see. And based on what it is known, that the holidays of the year have a connection to the Torah portion in which they fall out. A known concept the Rebbe always talks about, that the holiday and the Torah portion, which is read at the same time, must connect, because God is the one who orchestrated them to come out at the same time. So we have to say that the theme that has to do with being born and passing on the same day and having your liberation on the next day, these themes all click and work really well together with the Torah portions that we read at that time, which are 2 Torah portions, Vayeitzei and Vayishlach. So Vayeitzei we spoke about, that's the Torah portion talking about Yaakov going down to Mesopotamia, to Lavan's house, dealing with his wicked uncle, and all that story that we mentioned earlier. But it's also connected, he says, to the next Torah portion, which is the Torah portion of Vayishlach. Why is it connected to the next Torah portion? Because the Shabbos, when the Rebbe was talking, the date of when the Rebbe gave this talk was the 9th of Kislev, and it was Parshas Vayeitzei. Now we know that when we in any given Shabbos, on every Sabbath we read 2 Torah portions. The Torah portion of the week we read in the morning, and by Mincha, in the afternoon service, we open up reading a short little portion of the next Torah portion. So that means that on Shabbos, Parshas Vayeitzei, we're also reading Parshas Vayishlach. So there's really 2 Torah portions in which we have its energy on the Shabbos, on this particular Shabbos. So we have to say it's connected somehow with the holiday and with the auspicious time of the Mittler Rebbe. So he's going to weave the 2 together to show us how they are connected. And now, we will see, that means that from these Torah portions and from this information regarding the Mittler Rebbe, we can derive certain teachings, because Torah is meant to teach us something, how to live. We can derive certain teachings that will inspire us, and particularly, we always have to take teachings that are relevant at the time that we're living. Now, Torah is timeless. So you can find teachings in the Torah that apply to whichever time you're living in. We understand that people living today's modern world need different derivatives from the Torah instructions than the people living 100 years ago. It was a different world. So the Torah instructions it's the same principles, but delivered and emphasizing that which is particularly pertinent to that time and period of history. So the Rebbe says, what we're going to do over here in this particular talk that I'm going to share with you, he says, I'm going to share with you teachings in which are inspiration and lessons and derivative and directions that are particularly pertinent to the time we're living right now. And what is that? What is that? The true and complete redemption through our righteous Moshiach. Like it has been spoken many times, that we've already finished and completed all the work, and all that we have to do right now is to go ahead and greet Moshiach, our righteous Mashiach, in the literal. That's chapter 1. So let's begin. The Rebbe says, what are we going to learn? Let's try to find the first lesson, or what's the primary lesson over here. The primary wonder and phenomenal thing that the Mittler Rebbe passed away on the same day of his birthday is very unique, but the sages tell us that is special. It's not just special because it's just a cute fact and a nice fact that would be good for I don't know, one of these games like Jeopardy, or one of these games where they ask people facts. So Hasidic Jeopardy, tell us which Hasidic master was born and passed away on the same day. Okay, but who says that it has any relevance, any meaning, spiritual meaning? Well, the sages say this to us. The sages speak about it in Tractate Rosh Hashanah and in Tractate Sota, where they say, when Moses says in the end of Deuteronomy, in the third to the last Torah portion, Parshas Vayeitzei, he says, I am 120 years old today. The sages tell us, why does it say today? He says, I am today 120 years old. So the sages say that Moshe was saying to them, today I filled my days and my years. What does that mean? From here we derive that God, because a person can't choose how long they're going to live. Our lives are completely up to a higher authority. God is the one who decides our life. So from here we see that God sits and fills the years of the righteous from day to day and from month to month. Like it says in the verse, the number of your days I will fill. What does that mean? That God fills the years that he shouldn't have suddenly pass away in the middle of a month, meaning without completing a full month, or in the middle of a year without completing the full year. So God completes the days. He completes from day to day and from month to month to make it literally perfect days. Now, if this is something that God is doing, if this is something that God himself sits and occupies himself in making sure that the life of a tzaddik, the life of the righteous person, is perfect, that must be that there is something significant about it and important. So the simple meaning of it is that by a tzaddik, there is a tzaddik. Who's a tzaddik? A tzaddik is a righteous individual, so it's a perfect person. Since the tzaddik is perfect, so therefore there is a perfection regarding all matters of his life. Regarding all aspects of his being, there's perfection. So his perfection also is in his years. He lives perfect years. That's part of the perfection of the tzaddik. So perfect that it's down to the day. That would be the explanation. That would be the meaning of what the sages are saying. Tzaddikim are so perfect, and if they're perfect, they also have perfect years. God makes sure, since they can't perfect their years, whatever is in their capabilities to perfect, they perfect themselves. Whatever is outside of their capabilities to perfect, like how long you're going to live, so God has to kick in, and then God does kick in. So God makes sure if you're living a perfect life, that he will perfect it with God's perfection, that he will make that your life should be perfect years. Excuse me. The Rebbe, however, asks a question. He says, I don't get it. We're talking about the life of a spiritual person, a spiritual giant, someone whose entire existence is spirituality, meaning his soul and everything about his soul. His body, see, what's the difference between extremely saintly people and regular people? To regular people, our bodies are primary in our life. It's very, very important to us that we eat a good lunch. It's very, very important to us that we feel physically okay and feel physically good. It's very important to us that our furniture in our home looks really nice. We have nice garden because we're physical people, and physicality makes us. It leaves a very big impression upon us. But a tzaddik is someone who the spiritual is his reality. His world is the spiritual. And therefore, to the tzaddik, he cares. What matters to him is that mitzvahs should be perfect. Torah should be perfect. That his character traits should be perfect. It's spiritual matters that are important to the life of the tzaddik, not physicality. Since the physical things are not as important by the tzaddik, so why do we make a big deal of the fact that he physically lived for a certain amount of time, which is more about the physical existence, that there's a perfection in the physical world? It's almost like if they eulogize a tzaddik, a righteous person, after his passing. I'm sure we would get up and speak, oh, you should see with what kind of devotion he prayed. You should see only with what kind of sensitivity and care he took care of people. You should see with what kind of perfection, with what kind of perfectness he studied Torah, and how every time he said something, it was always with such perfection, and every word was measured, and it was so impeccable and so whatever. We talk about all the perfections, but we speak about spiritual. Imagine if you go ahead and continue speaking about how perfect his nose was. He had such a perfect complexion, and the physical features, that he was also beautiful. I mean, nothing wrong with a person being handsome and beautiful, and it's a nice thing. But that's when you're talking about a model. People who live their lives are their physical body, their physical physique of their body. That's important to them. Well, for these people, you go ahead and you'll analyze their physical, but a spiritual giant, is this not what we'll talk about? It's not important. And even if it could be mentioned, it would be mentioned very, 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 very b'derech tafel. Tafel means very, very secondary. It won't be made into a major big deal. In the words of the Rebbe, the life that it's not only that a tzaddik cares about spirituality, but actually his life is his soul, not his body. His entire life, that means all of his energy in his life, he brings from what it says in Tanya, that a tzaddik, his life is not his physical oxygen. His life is not his physical food that he eats. His life is his love of God, his fear of God, and his faith in God. That's his energy, and that's his life. So when we're talking about him, we have to speak about his love, his fear, his faith, his wisdom, his knowledge. These are things that should be spoken of. But the physical perfection of how tall he was, and and in the same manner, how many years he physically lived, seems to be very superficial and very unimportant. But yet the sages say that the greatest tzaddikim and the most righteous of people, like Moses, and we're saying it over here regarding the second Chabad Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, people like that, they were so great that they lived perfect lives, that they physically lived, they passed away on the day they were born. It would seem like it's a completely unimportant fact. So to answer that question, that's his question he asks in chapter 1. I'm sorry, in chapter 2. To answer the question, we begin chapter number 3. And he says like this: it's true. The service and the life of a righteous individual, of a tzaddik, is not his physical body. The life of the tzaddik is his soul. and all the spiritual qualities of the soul. As we said earlier, his love, his fear of God, his devotion, his commitment, his compassion, his kindness, his generosity, his sensitivity, his intelligence and his wisdom, and that's the life of the tzaddik. That's true. However, the ultimate perfection of that life, of that spiritual life, is if that perfect spiritual perfection, if that spiritual perfection will also find expression in his physical body, that the physical body will reflect and show the perfection of the soul. So again, what's important is not the fact that he has a perfect physical body, a perfect, physical appearance. That's not at all. That's external. That's superficial. If what we're admiring is his or her physicality, but when the physical body is beautiful, and when the physical body is perfect, not because it is perfect, but because the soul is perfect, and the soul is magnificently beautiful and radiant, and the radiance of the soul comes through the body because the body and soul are perfectly synchronized and one. That's the highest perfection of a person, because the highest perfection of a person is when there isn't a schism, when there isn't a divide, when there isn't a disconnect between their spiritual and their physical. Why is that so? Because when God sends our soul down in our body, the service that God wants our soul to do in this world is to rectify the world, beginning with our own bodies. Since the soul is given a task to rectify the body, how do we know when the body has reached its ultimate rectification? When the body becomes perfectly expressive of the soul, that the qualities of the soul are fully manifesting in the body. So the body and the soul are now completely compatible with each other. So a person could have a lot of spiritual qualities, but it could be that they haven't worked enough on the physical, that the physical should not obscure their soul. So you'll see a person who is magnificently great spiritually, but then physically there's like kind of average. A tzaddik who is so perfect and therefore and completely fulfills that which God desires of the tzaddik in this world, a righteous individual, to elevate and to infuse spirituality into the physical. So then what happens is there isn't one area in their physical life that isn't fully permeated with soul. And if the soul is perfect, then that perfection affects the body as well. And then you will have a perfect soul and a perfect body. So again, the value is not in the body, the value is in the soul. But in what's the ultimate sign of the soul's complete, the soul having completely completed its mission and fulfilled that which it was sent down, is if it can take its perfection into the body as well. And it goes even deeper than that, the Rebbe says. It comes in stages. The first stage is that the body becomes a vessel to the soul. Becomes a vessel. And see, the body naturally for us in our own lives, we can detect that not always is our body a vessel to the soul. Sometimes there's conflict. Sometimes our souls would do much better if they don't, if we're not listening to our body. The communication of our body sometimes is pulling us in directions that are antithetical to the soul. That means that there is a schism, there is a divide between our spiritual self and our physical self. If someone can bring their body into such compliance with their soul, and not only compliance, but the body can tune into the soul so deeply that the body becomes a complete vessel, a container. Its entire being is to receive and reveal and convey the soul. That's a very high level. Now let's take it a step deeper, the Rebbe says. There's a certain point where the body ascends even being a vessel. It's beyond being a vessel. It's almost as if the spiritual light of the soul continues manifesting itself, condenses into the body, and the body is just a continuation of the spiritual energies of the soul. It's almost like the body ceases to be body. The body just becomes a more tangible form of energy, of soul energy. That's how refined the body has become, that it has become redefined to become like just a continuous flow of energy. There is the soul, the brightness, the godly light of the soul, and now it continues into the body so that it has a physical visibility in this world. So it's almost like the body becomes completely swallowed up by the soul. And that's the highest perfection. Now, what's the greatness? The Rebbe says something very deep. The greatness over here is not only that the soul is so powerful, that it manages to permeate the body everywhere in the body, not leave one part of the body that's not filled with the brightness of the soul, with the light of the soul, with the spiritual glow of the soul. That would mean that the soul's perfection is perfect even when it's not in the body. To say like this, a person can have a perfect soul. It's just possible that they didn't really manage to get their body kind of completely in sync with their soul. Then there's another individual who's worked on refining their body, that their body is kind of almost like transparent to their soul. So then what's the greatness? It's not adding to the soul. It's just adding that there's a certain perfection. That even the body is also a conveyor of godly light. Even the body is holy. Not only is the soul holy, but the body is also holy. He's adding over here, he says something deeper. He says when the soul permeates the body so much that the body and soul become completely one, then not only has the body become holy, but the soul has become magnificently holier than when the soul is just perfect on her own. The soul's perfection on its own is much less than when the soul's perfection is harmonized with the body. Because when it's harmonized with the body, something deeper is revealed in the soul that was never revealed before. So therefore, only the biggest and most righteous people can attain this level of achieving complete unification of body and soul. Now, what does it have to do with living perfect years? So he says like this. Since what makes up the primary factors, the primary features that define physicality, the physical world, are time and space. Spiritual worlds are beyond time and beyond space. The physical world is defined by time and space. So when we speak about physical perfection, it has to be perfection in space and perfection in time. And that's why it matters that the years, the physical amount of time that the tzaddik was living in this world ends up being perfect. That means that there is a perfection in the physical element of the tzaddik. That the tzaddik, the righteous person, reached a level of perfection that permeated the physical. Since the physical is primarily built on a system of time and space, so the time element has to reveal perfection. And how will that manifest? Is that when you at the end of this person's life, you can see perfect years. He made his way around time, whatever amount of time, but he's gone around the cycle. There's no extra piece of an extra month, an extra 3 days from birthday to birthday. It's a full and completed cycle. And you can see perfection in the physical. What does it mean? What does it mean? It means in reality is that it says that time, every single day that God gives us to live in our physical world, through our physical actions of mitzvot, through the good deeds that we do and the Torah that we study while we're in a physical world, we correct or we fix a garment for the soul. The Zohar says that every day of our life, we produce a garment through the physical mitzvot that we do. We produce a spiritual garment for the soul, in which the soul later in the afterlife can experience the ultimate godly light. So the Zohar says that if we're clumsy or a little forgetful or distracted a certain day, and we do not fulfill our mission on that day, then we are lacking a certain garment. Then that particular garment of our soul is lacking. So a tzaddik, however, that doesn't have a day that he's lacking, every single day utilizes the day to its fullest, has perfect garments. And if the number of those garments are 365, which represents every type, because every year has 365 types of days, because every day is different. And the 365 make a full circle. So if in the middle there's like a lacking, he lived 3 weeks less than a year, that last cycle of garments are not full. So there's only 342 garments of that cycle of that year with its particular energy. So there's an imperfection. So in order for it to be perfect, it needs to be full years, 365, full circles, as many times as it is. So the tzaddik lives for that amount of time. So what do we have over here? Of course, the perfection is a spiritual perfection. But since the spiritual needs to manifest in the physical, so the perfection of the soul has to include perfection of body. And since the body is physical and made up of time and space, so the time of how much time we live is perfect. And for that reason, the biggest tzaddikim attain that level of perfection. Now, the Rebbe says a very interesting thing, that in truth, since it says that God perfects the life of tzaddikim from day to day, and it doesn't say only some tzaddikim, it says all tzaddikim, which means all saintly people. You have to say that all people that are saintly really achieve this. This is there by everybody. And even though we see that so many of them did not pass away on their birthday, and it seems like their years are therefore not complete, we have to say that by them there is also a completion, but it's not so visible to our eyes. In other words, by them it's also, if it says God does that, it must be by everybody. So even if a tzaddik passes away 3 months before his birthday, it must be that by him he also passed away on the day of his birthday. But hold it, it's not that way. How can you say that? It's just not visible. But that seems ridiculous. The Rebbe gives two explanations how it's possible. It's possible, he says, two ways. Number one, it's possible that this tzaddik was supposed to live, let's say the tzaddik passes away in the middle of the 65th year. Okay, he's 64 and a half years old and he passes away. So it could be, the Rebbe says like this, this tzaddik was supposed to leave this world after 65 years. However, because he was so intense that in 3-4 months or 6 months in the year, he managed to accomplish what another person would need what he himself would need a whole year. He got it done much faster. So in a sense, he really completed the full 65, but he's lacking in his years. The reason he's lacking in the years is because he finished it earlier, not because he didn't complete it. He completed the full round, but he got it done faster. Or another possibility, he was really supposed to live 64. That's what the time that he needed garments for, 64 years. The fact that he lived an extra 3 months is because God gave him extra bonus time to do whatever. But that was not part of what his life was really supposed to accomplish in the physical. And therefore, we can say that by every tzaddik, there is really a completion of their life, full cycle years. Their main years are all full cycle years. However, there are certain tzaddikim, like Moshe, and very special tzaddikim, that the concept is not just a concept, but it's actually visible in this world completely. That they can literally see how they lived full lives. Who are those tzaddikim? He says the leaders of the generation. The leaders of the generation, who are they? Moshe, the great leader of Israel, was born and passed away on the same day. And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our forefathers. Because the sages say in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah that according to the opinion that their birthdays in the month of Nisan, there's an argument when they were born. According to the opinion that they were born in the month of Nisan, they also passed away in the month of Nisan. You see that the sages are saying that their birthday and their yahrzeit are at least in the same month. By Moshe, it says that it was actually the same day. So we see that concept exists. Now, this is all an introduction, again, to the theme that we're going to be learning in this entire talk, that the ultimate messianic state and the ultimate state where we're all heading to is that there shouldn't be any separation between the perfection of the spiritual world over the physical. That physicality and the spiritual should be perfectly in sync and aligned with each other. And that's Moshiach's reality. Bezrat Hashem, tune in to part 2 of this episode 34. I plan on doing that still this week before Shabbos. Thank you for joining. And meanwhile, let us see Moshiach now.